Jasmine had always been different from the other children in her village. While the others were running through the fields and playing games, she would sit quietly, observing everything around her. She noticed the little details that others missed, the way the sunlight hit the flowers, the sound of a bird calling in the distance, or the way the wind would change direction with the passing clouds. Jasmine's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Green, admired their daughter's thoughtfulness. They would often talk to each other in private about how wise and sensible Jasmine was, even though it sometimes made her seem distant from other kids. One evening, Mr. Green turned to his wife and said, "Jasmine is smart, but I wish she would just relax sometimes. She's always thinking ahead. She doesn't know how to have fun like the other children." Mrs. Green sighed and nodded. "I know. She worries too much about what might happen. I hope she learns to enjoy life more." Despite their concerns, Jasmine was a treasure to them. She had a keen sense of responsibility, and every task she was given, she would do with care and consideration. Her older brother Tommy often teased her about being too serious. "Come on, Jasmine," Tommy would say with a laugh. "Stop worrying about everything. Just join us in the fun." But Jasmine would always shake her head. "I need to think about what could go wrong. I can't help it." Though she was close to her family, Jasmine couldn't escape the feeling that there was something missing in her life, something more than just careful planning. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but it was as if she was searching for a way to let go of her worries. One afternoon, Jacob came to the village. He was a young man from a nearby town, known for being friendly and charming. He had heard about Jasmine and her careful nature, and was intrigued. "She must be someone special," he thought to himself, "to think so deeply about everything." After hearing many people in the village talk about Jasmine, Jacob decided to visit her family. He met with Meister and Mrs. Green first. "I've heard a lot about Jasmine," he said. "She sounds like someone who really thinks things through. Is that true?" Mr. Green smiled proudly. "Yes, that's our Jasmine. She's always thinking ahead, but sometimes she can be a little too cautious for her own good." Mrs. Green added, "She notices the smallest things. I think one day she will make a wonderful woman. She's so careful, so attentive." Jacob was curious. He had always admired people who were thoughtful, but he wondered if Jasmine was more than just careful. He wanted to see for himself. "I'd like to meet her," he said with a smile. The next day, Jasmine was given the task of fetching a bucket of water from the well. The well was not far from the house, but it was deep, and the path leading to it was uneven. Jasmine had to carefully balance the heavy bucket, and she always worried about something going wrong. She stood by the door, looking outside at the well in the distance. What if I trip? She thought. What if the rope breaks and I lose the bucket? What if I fall in while pulling it up? Her heart raced as she thought about all the things that could go wrong. She could feel her stomach tighten with nervousness. Her mother called out from inside the house, "Jasmine, don't take too long. The water is needed for dinner." Jasmine took a deep breath. She knew she had to get the water, but her mind was filled with worries. She walked slowly toward the well, thinking about every possible problem that might occur. When she reached the well, she stopped and stared at the edge, feeling unsure. She noticed a small stone near the rim. What if that stone causes the bucket to tip over? She wondered. What if I trip on it and fall in? The thought of falling into the well terrified her, even though she knew it was highly unlikely. After a long time of thinking, Jasmine decided that it was too risky. It's too dangerous today, she thought. I won't take the chance. She walked back to the house, her heart still racing. Mrs. Green looked up when Jasmine entered the kitchen. "Why didn't you get the water, dear?" she asked, surprised. "The well is fine. You don't need to worry so much." Jasmine hesitated. "I just couldn't shake the feeling that something could go wrong," she explained quietly. Mrs. Green smiled gently. "The world isn't as dangerous as you think. Sometimes you need to trust yourself." Jasmine didn't feel entirely convinced. What if something really did go wrong later because she hadn't gotten the water? Her thoughts swirled as she tried to let go of her worries, but she couldn't help feeling anxious. That afternoon, Jacob came to visit the Green family. He had heard that Jasmine was careful and thoughtful, but he wasn't sure if she was also someone who could enjoy life. He decided to see for himself. Jacob walked into the garden where Jasmine was sitting. She was lost in thought, looking at the flowers and the clouds above. He smiled as he approached her. "Hello, Jasmine," he greeted her warmly. "I've heard a lot about you. I hear you're very careful and always think ahead." Jasmine looked up, a little surprised. She wasn't used to someone paying so much attention to her. "Hello," she replied softly. "Yes, I like to think things through. It helps me feel prepared." Jacob sat down next to her. "I see," he said. "But don't you ever think that maybe you're thinking too much? What if you miss out on something fun or important because you're so focused on all the possible problems?" Jasmine looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "I try to be careful," she said slowly. "I don't want to make mistakes." Jacob smiled gently. "Everyone makes mistakes, Jasmine. It's part of life. If you're always waiting for things to be perfect, you might miss out on some of the best moments." Jasmine thought about this for a moment. Could he be right? She had always believed that being careful was the best way to avoid problems, but Jacob's words made her question that idea. Was she missing out on life by worrying so much? The next day, Jasmine was walking to the market when she saw a man fixing a roof. He was standing on a ladder high above the ground. Jasmine froze, watching him closely. What if the ladder falls? She thought. What if I get too close and it tips over? What if I get hurt? She stood there for several minutes, unsure of what to do. Finally, an old woman walked by and saw Jasmine standing still. "Why are you standing here, child?" the woman asked. "The ladder is perfectly safe. You're wasting your time worrying about something that probably won't happen." Jasmine felt embarrassed, but the woman's words made her stop and think. She looked back at the ladder and saw that it was sturdy, with no signs of danger. Maybe she had been overthinking again. She took a deep breath and walked onto the market, her mind still buzzing with questions. What if she had been wrong? What if something did go wrong? But she reminded herself that sometimes it was okay to trust that things would be fine without overthinking everything. A few weeks after Jacob's visit, Jasmine found herself thinking about the conversation they had. Jacob's words lingered in her mind. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is just let go and enjoy life. She wasn't sure if she fully understood what he meant, but she couldn't help wondering if she was missing something by always worrying. One morning, Jacob came by to visit the Green family again. He had a warm smile and a friendly way about him, which made Jasmine feel both comfortable and nervous at the same time. "Jasmine, I was wondering," he said, his tone casual but inviting. "Would you like to go on a picnic with me? I thought it might be a good chance for us to talk more and enjoy the day. What do you think?" Jasmine hesitated. A picnic sounded like a fun idea, but almost immediately her mind began to race with thoughts of all the things that could go wrong. What if it rains? What if I forget something important? What if we get lost? Her stomach tightened at the thought of all the possible problems. Jacob noticed her hesitation. "Jasmine, what are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her worried expression. I don't know," Jasmine said quietly. "What if we end up in a storm? What if I forget to bring something? What if it's not as fun as we expect?" Jacob smiled warmly, sensing that this was more than just a simple picnic. "I understand, Jasmine. You're always thinking ahead. But sometimes life is about letting go of those worries. Not everything needs to be perfect. Sometimes it's enough to simply be in the moment." Jasmine looked at him, still unsure. "But what if something goes wrong?" Jacob chuckled lightly. "What if nothing goes wrong at all? What if we just enjoy the day without worrying about what could happen? Jasmine thought about it. Maybe Jacob had a point. She had spent so much time thinking about all the possible problems. Maybe she was missing out on the chance to just enjoy life as it was. She smiled hesitantly. Okay, I'll go with you, but I'll bring my umbrella just in case, she added, still a little cautious. Jacob laughed. Of course, you can bring whatever you like, but let's make it a fun day, no matter what happens. The day of the picnic arrived, and Jasmine found herself both excited and nervous. She woke up early to pack the picnic basket, making sure to bring all the essentials: sandwiches, fruit, and her favorite blanket. As she walked toward the spot Jacob had suggested, she couldn't help but feel the familiar stir of worry. What if she had forgotten something important? What if the weather turned bad? What if she made a mistake? When she arrived at the small park by the river, she saw Jacob already there, sitting on a blanket, looking relaxed and cheerful. He waved as she approached. "Hey, Jasmine, glad you could make it," he called out, his face lighting up with a smile. "I'm so glad you're here." Jasmine smiled back, but felt a little out of place. She had never been on a picnic like this before. The calmness of the day made her feel even more anxious. "Hi, Jacob," she said softly. "I brought some things. I hope I remembered everything." Jacob stood up and helped her spread the blanket. "You're perfect, just as you are, Jasmine. There's no need to worry about the small stuff." As they sat down, Jasmine couldn't stop thinking about the weather. The sky was blue, but there were clouds on the horizon. "What if it rains?" she asked quietly, her eyes drifting to the sky. Jacob followed her gaze and smiled. "If it rains, then we'll deal with it. But we're here now, and that's all that matters." For the first time that day, Jasmine began to relax. She set down the basket and opened it, revealing the sandwiches and fruit she had packed. They ate together, talking about small things, laughing at silly jokes, and enjoying the quiet peace of the river. The longer they sat, the more Jasmine began to feel the weight of her worries lighten. Maybe it was true. Maybe sometimes it was better to stop overthinking and just enjoy life. As they finished their meal, Jasmine looked over at Jacob, who was lying back on the blanket, his hands behind his head, looking content. "Thank you," she said softly, "for making me come. I feel like I needed this." Jacob turned to her, his smile warm. "I'm glad, Jasmine. Sometimes we just need a little push to realize that life can be good, even when things aren't perfect." Jasmine smiled back, feeling a sense of peace that she hadn't experienced in a long time. The clouds were still there, But she didn't feel so anxious anymore. She realized that life didn't have to be planned out perfectly for it to be enjoyable. Sometimes, the best moments came when she let go of her worries and just lived in the moment. As the sun began to set, casting a soft golden light over the park, Jasmine and Jacob packed up their things. They walked back to the village together, the sounds of birds and rustling leaves around them. Jasmine felt a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you, Jacob," she said again. "This was really nice. I'm glad I came." Jacob smiled. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you enjoyed the day." When they reached the edge of the village, Jasmine stopped for a moment and turned to face him. "I think I'm starting to understand what you meant the other day," she said. "Maybe I do think too much sometimes. Maybe it's okay to just let go and enjoy life." Jacob nodded. "Exactly. Life is never going to be perfect, Jasmine. But it's up to us to make the most of it, even when things aren't exactly how we want them." Jasmine took a deep breath, her heart feeling lighter than it had in days. "I've spent so much time worrying about what might go wrong. Maybe now I can learn to just trust myself more." Jacob smiled at her, proud of her realization. "You're already on your way, Jasmine. You're one of the smartest people I know. But sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is relax and enjoy what's in front of you." Jasmine nodded, her eyes sparkling. "I'm going to try that more. Letting go, not worrying so much." Jacob smiled warmly at her. "I think you'll do great, Jasmine. Just keep being you." As they said their goodbyes, and Jasmine walked back to her home, she felt lighter, more confident. Maybe it was time for her to stop overthinking everything. Maybe it was time to trust life a little more and enjoy the simple moments as they came. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine continued to reflect on the lessons she had learned from Jacob. It wasn't always easy for her to let go of her worries, but she made a conscious effort to try. Whenever a small worry crept into her mind, she reminded herself of the picnic, of the moments she had shared with Jacob, and of the calm she felt when she just let go. One evening, as Jasmine sat with her mother, Mrs. Green noticed a change in her daughter. "Jasmine, you seem different. You're smiling more. You seem more relaxed." Jasmine looked up from her sewing and smiled. "I've been trying to relax more. I've realized that I don't need to worry so much." Mrs. Green raised an eyebrow. "Is this because of Jacob?" Jasmine blushed slightly, but nodded. "Yes, I think he helped me see things differently. I'm learning to trust myself more." Mrs. Green smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that, dear. It's good to let go sometimes. Life is full of surprises, and we can't always predict what will happen. But if we trust ourselves, We can handle whatever comes our way." Jasmine felt a warmth in her chest as she listened to her mother's words. She realized that her mother was right. She'd spent so many years worrying about what could go wrong that she had forgotten to enjoy the good moments. But now, she was learning to embrace life with open arms. As Jasmine looked out the window that evening, she felt a quiet sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about the future or the things that might go wrong. She was simply enjoying the present moment. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Jasmine had made so much progress in learning to relax and let go of her worries. For the first time, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known before. She was more comfortable in her own skin, more at peace with herself. But life, as it always does, had a way of throwing new challenges her way. One morning, Mrs. Green sent Jasmine to the market to buy some fresh vegetables for dinner. The weather had been warm and sunny all week, but today, dark clouds were beginning to gather on the horizon. Jasmine stepped out the door, feeling a knot in her stomach. What if it starts raining on my way back? She thought. What if the vegetables spoil before I get home? What if I lose the money for them? Her thoughts began to race, and she almost turned back. But then she remembered Jacob's words. What if nothing goes wrong? She took a deep breath, reminding herself to trust in the present moment. She could handle whatever came her way. She set off toward the market, determined to stay calm. The walk was peaceful at first, and the closer she got to the market, the more relaxed she felt. She was proud of herself for pushing through her worries. However, as she walked back with her basket full of fresh vegetables, the first drops of rain began to fall. The weather had turned much quicker than she had expected. Jasmine looked up anxiously at the sky, her heart pounding in her chest. What if it pours? She thought. What if the vegetables get wet? The rain began to fall harder, and Jasmine quickened her pace, trying to stay calm. But the more she thought about the rain, the more anxious she became. The wind picked up, blowing the rain sideways, and Jasmine found herself in a full sprint. Her basket jostled, and she was afraid it would spill all over the muddy path. Just as she was about to give in to her worries and turn back, she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Jasmine!" Jacob's voice called out from behind her. She stopped and turned around, surprised to see him standing there, his jacket pulled tight around him to shield himself from the rain. "Jacob!" she exclaimed, feeling both relieved and embarrassed. "What are you doing here?" Jacob smiled, stepping closer. "I was out walking when I saw you running in the rain. You looked like you needed help." Jasmine laughed nervously. I thought I could make it, but now I'm worried my vegetables are ruined." Jacob looked at her with understanding. "Don't worry. We'll get you home. Your vegetables will be just fine." He took the basket from her and handed it back to her once he had a better grip. "Let's go. Together. I've got you." As they walked back to Jasmine's house, Jacob's presence helped calm her down. The rain poured down heavily, but with Jacob by her side, Jasmine didn't feel as scared. She realized that sometimes it was okay to accept help from others. She didn't always have to handle everything on her own. As they reached the front door, Jacob smiled at her. "See? You made it through. You didn't let the rain stop you. You're doing great, Jasmine." Jasmine felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thank you, Jacob. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jacob gave her a teasing look. "You would have figured it out. But sometimes it's nice to have someone with you, right?" Jasmine nodded, smiling. "Yes, it is." Over the next few days, Jasmine continued to reflect on what happened in the rain. For so long, she had been independent and thought she could handle everything by herself. But that experience showed her something new. Sometimes it was okay to rely on others. She thought about how Jacob had helped her. It wasn't just that he carried the basket for her or shielded her from the rain. It was how he made her feel safe in a moment when everything felt out of control. He had taught her that it was okay to let go of some of her worries and let others be there for her. Jasmine's mind was still buzzing with the realization that maybe she'd been too hard on herself all these years. Maybe, just maybe, it was okay to trust others as much as she trusted herself. A few days later, Jacob came to visit the Green family. Jasmine was working in the garden, and when she saw him approach, her heart fluttered. It wasn't just because of what had happened in the rain. It was because she felt like she was starting to see him differently. He wasn't just someone who had helped her when she needed it. He was someone she was beginning to value more and more. "Hey, Jasmine." Jacob greeted her with his usual easygoing smile. "How's the garden coming along?" Jasmine smiled back. "It's coming along fine. I've been busy with everything around here, but it's good to keep my hands in the soil." "That's great," Jacob said. He paused, looking at her with an expression that made Jasmine's heart race. "You know, I've been thinking about something." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I've been thinking about how much I admire your strength, Jasmine," Jacob said, his voice sincere. "You've been through a lot, and you handle everything with care. But I also think you're learning how to trust life and others a little more. That's something special." Jasmine looked down, feeling a bit shy, but also proud. Thank you, Jacob. It's still hard sometimes, but I'm trying. Jacob reached out and gently touched her hand. I know, but you're doing great. You're stronger than you think. Jasmine looked up at him, her heart full of warmth. I've learned a lot from you, she said softly. Jacob smiled, his hand still resting on hers. And I've learned a lot from you too. I think you're amazing, Jasmine. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They just stood there, in the quiet of the garden, feeling a sense of connection that had grown over time. Jasmine realized that she was no longer just trying to handle everything on her own. She had begun to open her heart, allowing herself to trust Jacob, her family, and even herself. She was learning that life wasn't just about anticipating problems. It was about being able to face them and to enjoy the good moments too. As the days went on, Jasmine continued to grow in ways she had never expected. Her relationship with Jacob deepened, and she found herself learning more about herself every day. She was no longer afraid of the things that might go wrong. Instead, she was starting to embrace the possibilities of what could go right. One evening, Jasmine's mother asked her to help with the harvest. The weather had been kind to the crops this year, and there was plenty to gather. Jasmine felt excited, but also nervous. She had never helped with such a big task before, and she wasn't sure she could do it all on her own. As she worked alongside her mother, Jasmine realized that it wasn't about doing everything perfectly. It was about learning as she went and not being afraid to make mistakes. She picked the vegetables with care, making sure not to damage them. But she also allowed herself to enjoy the simple rhythm of the task. Her thoughts wandered to Jacob as she worked. She had come to appreciate his perspective on life. He had shown her how to live in the moment and trust herself more. He had helped her see that sometimes the smartest thing she could do was not to worry so much about what could go wrong. As the evening sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the field, Jasmine felt at peace. She wasn't perfect, but she was enough. And with Jacob and her family by her side, she knew she could handle whatever came her way.